Anytime you're having to get your alcohol out of a closet, it always just feels sketchy. We have this closet in our dining room, and that's where our wine fridge and beverage fridge are situated, and we want to turn this into a dry bar. So let's get to it. As every worthwhile home renovation project should, this one started out with a little demolition. But you're not here to watch us tear out an old closet, so here's a quick 20-second montage of our demo work to some really filthy dubstep. So now that we got the closet knocked out, I need to figure out the electrical situation. So we have one switch here that actually controls the ceiling fan and light above where the camera is right now. That's gonna stay here and just get remounted on one of these studs. But then we have this mess right here that is just a bunch of different wires for the rest of this room. And I think I'm gonna try to put an outlet and a switch here. One outlet will be basically at the countertop, and then the switch will actually control another outlet up top that will run lights at the top of the dry bar. And then we also have another outlet down here that I'll still be able to use to plug in for the fridge. So I'll add right here that I wound up installing a smart outlet for the bar lights, and I could turn them on and off via phone or my voice, and that way I could save the spot that I was going to install a switch down by the bar top, and I could install another outlet. The restoration and prep work for this area wasn't perfect, but all the imperfections we knew were going to be hidden by either the Carcass or cabinets. For example, we just used 3/4 inch plywood to fill the gaps in the flooring since we didn't have the original floorboards. And we also left some imperfections on the wall and beams just because we knew they were going to be hidden by either the Carcass or cabinets. A lot of projects I'll do all my sketches by hand, but this one was just involved enough that I went ahead and made everything in SketchUp. Once I had the design in SketchUp, I used SketchUp in order to get all the dimensions, and then I went over to cutlistoptimizer.com, and you can enter all the different board sizes or piece sizes that you need, the different sizes of stock sheets that you thought you might need, and it'll automatically start calculating the best way to cut everything in order to minimize the amount of materials needed. Now that I have my cut list, it was time to start batching everything out for the Carcass. I started off using what I like to call my poor man's track saw, which is just a guide that I made for my circular saw using some scrap pieces of plywood. It works really well. You don't have to buy one of those fancy track saws, but they are nice. And once I got pieces to a manageable size, I was able to cut everything else down on the table saw and miter saw. Most of the Carcass was built out of 3/4 inch maple plywood, but I did have some scrap pieces of other types of 3/4 inch plywood as well as some 1/2 inch plywood that I integrated into the design just to use up my scrap. Now that everything was batched out, it was time to start assembling the actual Carcass. To align these dividers evenly at the front and back of the Carcass, I just cut some scrap pieces of wood to use as spacers. For all of my drawers, I'll be using Bloom undermount slides. In addition, this Carcass will have a face frame, so in order to mount these undermount slides, I'm going to have to block them out away from where these dividers are in order for them to clear the face frame. So since I would have screws holding these blocks to the dividers or the Carcass, and then screws holding the slides to the blocks, I started off by marking where the screws holding the slides to the blocks would be, so that I would avoid putting the screws that hold the blocks to the Carcass in those locations. Face frame was made using poplar. I had a mix of 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch thickness board, so I went ahead and planed everything down to roughly 1/2 inch. Typically face frames are 3/4 inch, but hashtag no big deal. Once everything was to the same thickness, I used the table saw to rip everything down to the different widths that I would need for the face frame pieces, and used the miter saw to cut it all to length. Alright, so the face frame. I did not do the face frame like most people would tell you to do the face frame, but in the end it didn't really matter. It looks fine, but let me go ahead and explain to you what I did do. So the first thing is I attached all the face frame pieces individually rather than taking all the pieces, building one piece of face frame, and then attaching that one piece of face frame. I only did this because I was in a little bit of a time crunch. Not a great excuse, but I just didn't want to wait for glue to dry and assemble that face frame and all that stuff separately when I could just put it all right on and be done with it. However, because it wasn't all one piece now with good glue bonding everything close and tight, I did have to use wood filler in between all the pieces to make it look like one seamless piece. Since this was all going to be paint grade, I went ahead and attached it all with brad nails, as you can see here, rather than using pocket holes from the back and attaching it. This was only because I'm doing it paint grade. If I was actually going to be staining this, then I would have definitely put pocket holes to attach it so there was no wood filler on the front surface of the face frame. And as I wrap up here with wood filler and sanding, you might have noticed that I did not use any wood glue whenever I attached the pieces. Yeah, that was a complete mistake. Don't do that. I think that was just all part of me rushing through this under a time crunch, and I wasn't thinking right, and I just ran into it and started shooting nails in it before I put any wood glue on. I actually didn't even realize I did that until going back and watching these videos, so I'll just have to be mindful of that, and if they start coming loose over time, I might have to reattach. So now that the face frame was all done, it was finally ready for some paint. And I just don't paint. So since Lauren's less opposed to painting than me, she went ahead and painted the Carcass. And after we had 3 coats of paint on there, I hit it with 320 grit sandpaper to give it a nice silky smooth finish. Alright, so that is a wrap on the Carcass. I am next going to install the countertop and then the drawers and the drawer fronts. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you'll get notified whenever I release the videos for the countertop and the drawer fronts. If you're watching this video in the future and I've already made those videos and they're out on YouTube, then you can go ahead and look at these videos right here for links to those, the countertop install and the drawer fronts. Otherwise, until next time, take a chance and build something.